Welcome back, beautiful souls, to another episode of the Wisdom of Womanhood podcast. Going into a very, very potent conversation, I feel today. I am Miss Showy Moon, and love, as always, getting to have these conversations with beautiful Pippa.
Hello, everyone.
Getting ready to go on
Oh, I
holiday.
can't wait. My last baby moon before I can't travel. Well, on a plane, that is.
Yeah.
Won't stop me doing anything from driving.
Mm. Yeah, so we have heard some really great feedback from last week's episode.
I was just about to say
Um,
that. You took the words out my mouth.
yeah, it was really lovely to dive into some more of the taboo. I know it's something that in this podcast we're going to continue to swing back into. We're going to cover as many things that possibly impact us as women in the world. And we're really, really set on going into the places that some people are not comfortable going into in podcast spaces and social media spaces and stuff. So that felt really good to me to really ground us into that space and that conversation around self-pleasure. And touching on some stuff around sex and the myths and the things that hold us back as women and the stories we put in ourselves. So thank you for being in that sexy, sexy conversation with us.
It was awesome. I actually got a topic request. I just thought I'd just put it to you about, and it's funny because when the topic came up, I'd done a post about it and it was around love languages and how to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking like because we can tie something into love languages. So I had a friend reach out and say, can you help me with love languages? Like I just need to figure out mine and what it means, and when we got how do we connect when we have different love languages and things. So I thought it was quite a
Beautiful.
nice topic because we can have the taboo
Mm,
topics and we can have the
mm.
really deep topics. So yeah, thank you for that. And we'll add it to the list.
Well, I think it already is on the list,
Yeah.
because
I know
it is
you've got
because
a
I put
massive
love
list.
languages.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what would be great is within that conversation if we do love languages and erotic blueprint types,
Yeah.
because
Awesome.
they're two sides of the same coin. So absolutely, frick yes, we
Yeah.
will throw some of that at you with some
Yeah.
really practical how-tos in that conversation, which will be really helpful.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. However, today,
However,
funnily enough, Pippa and I had the exact same thought around what to go into next, which is around mother wounds and father wounds. So this episode in itself will be completely focused on unpacking what a mother wound is, how some of us who have been impacted by unhealthy attachment and relationships to our own mothers, what that looks like, how it feels, how it might be displayed, how it could impact our relationships, our intimacy, our self-worth, all of those kinds of things. Because it's a term that we're seeing more and more, there's definitely been a lot more out there in terms of understanding ourselves. We're hearing more around particular behaviors, and one thing that's come up is the mother wound. So one thing that Pippa and I were just speaking about is that this has been my biggest journey in my life. And my intention going into this conversation is to aim to keep it relatable and universal in terms of this, because even if you have not had challenging relationships with your mother, more than likely you have friends or family or partners that have. And so to try and give some understanding of what that might look like and feel like, and also to show up really vulnerably in this conversation for me, that's another intention. Sharing my story in relationship to my biological mother is something I'm comfortable with now. It's something that I've been doing for quite a long time in the places that it's been called into. But yeah, just to dive into maybe even a bit more vulnerability than I have before. Yeah.
that's what I love about you. And I think from my perspective is your mother wound doesn't have to be something like you said, we can compare ourselves, can't we, to our mother wounds and father wounds. And I did that for a long time. Like I thought, well, I've got great parents and blah blah blah. And as I did more inner work and self-discovery, I realized that I had mother
They're
wounds
still
in a
human.
different it was a different type. It was like a disconnect with my mom. And I adore my parents. I've got beautiful parents. They're just great people. They're not perfect by any means, but and I think it was when I was moving through mother wounds and father wounds, at first I was like, well, I don't have any. Because thankfully, and I grew up in a really loving home. And I think as I was on my self-discovery journey, I realized there were wounds there. And it wasn't
Yeah.
like, again, labeled bad. Like it wasn't like bad. So I
Just
think,
is.
yeah, it just was. Yeah. And I thought to myself, actually healing those wounds and understanding them and moving into them, it actually brought me and my mum so much closer because I spoke to
Mm,
her about it. And that was the really beautiful
mm.
thing, that moving, obviously everyone's different on this journey, and that's why Shawi and I share parts of our vulnerability, because I think sometimes, like you said, not everyone can relate to our story, and that's completely fine. But when we talk of it, like you said, universally, it becomes like, oh, okay. So for me, I think it's just not comparing our mother wounds, because it all looks very different to each of us.
Yeah. And it blends really beautifully into this conversation we've had around actually what trauma is. And
Mm.
there's this big kind of hype around it and a misinterpretation that it is massive events and that is the only thing that is trauma, or major abuse, major lack of care. Yes, all of those things. However, when we look at it from a psychological and physiological perspective, which is the best way to look at trauma, is that anything that has created some kind of contraction, dysregulation to the nervous system, incomplete stress cycles, anything that has created that kind of disruption within our system, that is a traumatic experience that then can alter the way we see the world, the way we see ourselves, the way we see connection. And it doesn't have to be major things that have occurred. When I was doing my training to become a somatic therapist, we looked at all the different types of trauma, which is so great for people to understand. Yes, there's developmental trauma, so trauma that has occurred over time, particularly in our younger years, acute traumatic events. And then there's also generational trauma, which we now understand about epigenetics. And Pippa was saying something beautiful before we started, that as she started unraveling, she realized that there were pieces from her grandmother that had come through and were there for her to navigate through as well. So generations. And then we've got collective trauma. So when as a society we experience great grief, great loss, all of these different things. And so when we kind of understand and open up our lens, and the other one is precognitive. So that's when we're in the womb and then the first 18 months of life, which we don't cognitively remember. And when we speak about the mother wound, looking at precognitive trauma in the womb and then up to the first 18 months of life, we may have experienced things that are only stored in the body and we don't have cognitive memory of, due to maybe having a mother that was highly stressed during her pregnancy, maybe a mother that suffered from postnatal depression in her early years, and was never diagnosed, which is a lot of our mother's generation and the ones before, definitely. And so all of those things that may have occurred, you might not even realize that they're sitting there. And you might not even realize that's why maybe you don't feel safe in relationships, maybe why you are more predisposed to things like anxiety and depression and everything. Because if you were in the womb and your mother was stressed and had higher cortisol levels, you will be born with higher cortisol levels. Which is, there's research done around this now. And so all of these bits that kind of integrate in, and when we can take that wide lens, help us to understand that often, to no fault of their own, our caregivers have unintentionally created, participated in, caused events or experiences that leave us with this variation of wounding, right? So we're going to start like with that. Like it's very wide. It doesn't mean that you have had to have a particularly abusive mother, like Pippa was just saying. Often, it's actually the taking off the pedestal of our parents and realizing that they are human and that they're flawed, and that they were only doing the best that they knew, which sometimes was creating patterns and experiences that left some pretty big disruptions in our system. And the other part of this is so beautiful for us to realize, right, is and it's something that I've definitely come to terms with and am still coming to terms with, is that we will, as mothers, unintentionally create patterns, behaviors, all of these things with our children, because we're not perfect.
Yeah.
And there's a real element of self-acceptance in our own imperfections around us as mothers. Like, I know I've definitely done stuff in the past where I'm like, oh shit. Like, yeah, that's gonna come up in 10 years.
Yeah, same.
But what we can do is then like have the tools right and the self-awareness and the lack of ego around it, so that maybe our children will come to us one day and be like, Mum, kind of fucked up a little bit. And I'll be like, yeah, I did.
Yeah,
Like, I know I was fucking trying, but I really got it wrong sometimes, didn't I? And
yeah.
that's how we change the patterns and the cycles of how we heal generationally through mother wounds, right?
Oh yeah, just about what you just said then, like with my two step kids, like so
Uh-huh.
it's like it's a constant journey. It's a constant like I spoke to my friend today. She's struggling with her mom and like her mom's just cut her off and it's just really sad. And I just, I was talking about like how we all go through a different journey with our parents and everyone's got it looks different to everyone. And I was thinking of the step kids and like, they're in a blended family and I just said like sometimes we're going to get it wrong, even with
Yep.
communication and things like that. Like I get it wrong, Chris gets it wrong, Showie gets it wrong. Like we're not
Mhm.
here to be robot to be perfect. Like what I do a lot of is I'll just think, oh shit, like that was just not the right thing to
Yeah.
say. Or, if when in my first trimester, I was really on edge. I was, this is that like mother wound in the reflection of, children as well. And I was on edge and I was a bit snappy with the kids, and that's not like me. And I just felt so guilty. And I sat down. I said, "Hey, I just sat them down, both of them." I said, "If I'm snapping, it's not you. It's not you." I said, "I'm really sorry. It's me. It's my hormones. It doesn't excuse like me snapping, but I said it will get better, and I promise I'll do my best." And it's funny. The youngest was like, "You should just do some breath work, Pip." I was like, "Yeah, you should. I should actually. Yeah, I should because I always talk about breath work and meditation and." They teach us too. Like you said, in like
Absolutely.
10 years, they're going to be like, you fucked up, mom. Yeah, sorry, I know. I was,
Yeah.
but that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
like we're teaching them that it's okay to fuck up. It's okay to
Yeah.
not be perfect. And I think with me, it's just, I think because I couldn't relate to people who'd had abusive mothers or fathers, I found it like unfamiliar territory for me until I started to really dive into it and realize like, but it all looks different. And the fact that I want to help people with that is it's the main thing.
Mm.
So a little bit about my mother wound and how I moved through it, because I know people want to know, well, how do you heal it and how do you get through it? And, a lot of it for me was, reparenting myself in ways where
Yeah.
I thought, well, my mum didn't do that. And again, that's not no fault of hers because she didn't have those tools like we do now. And I think partly of it was understanding my mum, understanding her mum, and then understanding the dynamics of that. So what was interesting with me is my mother wound was because of a father wound of my mum's, which is really
Mm.
interesting. So me and my mum had a disconnect because her dad was abusive. So my granddad was abusive, never abusive to me or my sister. We never saw that side of him, but his kids were abused. And my mum never had that daddy's girl relationship, and I always was I still am a daddy's girl. I'm both now, obviously, but I was a daddy's girl. I was very much, and that must have been really hurtful for mum in ways when I think about it. So when I understood that element of father and mother wound, it made me realize, oh, I understand. I sat down with my mum, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago before I moved to New Zealand, and I said, because they were kind of interested in my work and they are interested in what I do. And I've just been doing some self-reflection, and I know like your relationship with, because my granddad passed in 2021, so it was kind of like apparent to talk about the memories and stuff. And I remember just saying to her like, I understand you never had that dad relationship like I do with dad, and I know it can be really hurtful. And she just broke down, I broke down, we hugged it out, and that's healing. That is just uncovering it and just being like, there's no perfect way to heal it. It's just having the conversation, and it just switched ever since then. And
Mm.
the other element to my mother wound, which was partly me too, was growing up with all my bowel issues and stuff. So always feeling like that burden, having that disconnect where my mum would cry a lot and I used to blame me for that. There's that element to it as well. But then was that I didn't get first touch when I was born. So again, that, like from being born, that those emotions, like I was early, so my dad got first skin on skin. My mum didn't have skin on skin for like a few hours, I think. So I spoke to her about that. I was quite curious about that. And she told me, and I said, that's probably why there's that little bit of a disconnect. But now we're like, you can just see the difference in my relationship with my mum. And I think it's really nice now. I can say, no, I'm not a daddy's girl or a mummy's girl. I'm both. I love both my
Mm.
parents equally. So they were kind of mine, really, that again, like for me, there's a part of me that goes, oh, it doesn't sound that bad, does it? Where it's like, no, that was my experience. And going through that was tough because I did feel disconnected from my mum for a long time. And then once I healed that, I understand this mother wound that carries down this epigenetics that we spoke about. We carry like 14 generations, which is just insane. Is my nan, God bless her, she was orphaned at 2 or 3. So she lost her dad in the war, and
Mm.
then my great nan passed away. They all say it was heartbreak, but she had leukemia really early, like in her 20s. So my nan and her 2 siblings were orphaned, and they had to go live with an auntie. So there's that abandonment, rejection, because they were
Mhm.
passed from pillar to post, in
Mhm.
the 1940s, 30s even. And so feeling that abandonment, that rejection, so
Mhm.
healing that with the mother wound too. So
Mm. And what's so beautiful about what you've shared is that from what I hear in the conversation with mum, you entered it with a really compassionate lens and from a place of, I would love for us both to be in the space of recognizing what both of our stories have been. There was no putting yourself into victim. There was no blame. There was just this, maybe let's look at this with a lens of curiosity, through exploring what your relationship was.
yeah.
And that, that recognizing even of like, must have been really hard for you to see how close I was with dad. Like, fuck, that's so powerful. Like so powerful to speak into, again, what you unintentionally as the little girl would have contributed to in the stories potentially that your mum has carried for decades and she hasn't had the opportunity to witness. Like that's so powerful. Yeah, beautiful.
There's something in that
uh
though as well with my mom. Is like we had a
yeah.
conversation before they left in February, and I was really diving into my degree at the time, so we're doing my level 7, and I was like just passionate talking about it because they were asking questions. And I remember my mum saying something really interesting, and she said, well, we just get on with it. That's our generation. We just get on with it. Because I said, there must be so much that you could unpack, mum. I said, like, this isn't the space for it. I said, but,
Yep.
your childhood and stuff. So, because my mum can relate to Chris in a way, because Chris had quite an abusive mom. And it
Mhm.
just, like that relatability and being sat with mom, it is like kind of, she brought up Chris and brought up his childhood. And then I just said, there must be like things that you want to, share and heal. And she said, well, no, we just get on with it. It's like a stiff upper lip. I didn't say anything. Like I didn't judge that. I just said,
Yeah.
well, I'm here if you ever want to share it. Like, as a daughter to a mother.
Beautiful.
And yeah, I think and my dad said the same. It, but then what I realized was as well, and I'm excited to see them again in October because I grow so much when I don't see them physically, and I think there is a curiosity for them. I know there's a curiosity where they're like oh, you know what I mean? Like there's just something there where I think they are interested because there's something in the
Mhm.
healing that their soul wants and craves and needs, and I think there's just the layers of the conditioning of we just get on with it, we just get on with it, we just get on with it. And that's just like pushing it down, 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 down. And it will come up to feel at some point.
Mhm. Or it will manifest as physical, mental symptoms, emotional symptoms, which there's a massive lack of education, particularly with that generation. It's so beautiful though, because I guess what you're doing is planting the seeds, right? Planting the seeds, opening up the spaces, being authentic and vulnerable in yourself, inviting them into the healing journey, and then also just giving that autonomy and trust of like, whatever you choose to do in this lifetime, however much you choose to step into life or into your growth or whatever it is, I will be here. And also knowing the power of what we're able to do and how that does impact the souls before us and the souls after us, right? Like
Mm.
that's, yeah, it's such a beautiful way to look at it, as opposed to this being able to see the ways that our parents or our loved ones could be doing the work to become the people that they could have even more healthier and happier lives, and then ending up being resentful and trying to push them into it and stuff, right? It's like all we can do is hold the space, like be the light, shine, show them how it could be, show them what love looks like, show them that yes, it's okay to be in some discomfort, you know, being really vulnerable and the healing in itself, and then just trusting it.
There's an element of when you get deeper in this work as well, and I'm not speaking for everybody here because this can be quite hard for people to take. So I'm saying it with a lot of love and compassion. Because Chris and I have this conversation quite a lot, is our parents can teach us how we don't want to be. Our parents can teach us how we do want to be. And that's not to say, you know, it doesn't excuse the behavior. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it becomes this, I don't want to be that way, you know, and I want to do things differently. So my mum never had sex talk with me. She never had period talk with me. And, you know, until like I started my first bleed, we spoke about this on the rites of passage. Like it was okay, your period's here, great. Like, here's some pads. Like it was never a conversation. So when I'm having a little boy, obviously, but I'll be having conversation with him when he goes through his teenage years. But just if I ever have a little girl, you know, in my future, I would sit down with her and say, hey, my mum didn't do this for me, so because my nan never did it with mum. To see how we're breaking these generational things, and I think it's really powerful, and it's a lot. It's a lot. Like if you're healing right now and going through like mother wounds, father wounds, whatever it is, you unpacking trauma and just whatever it looks like for you, like just take a minute just to be like, this fucking work is hard and it's challenging and it's not easy. So just give yourself just a minute and just be like, I'm breaking generational like trauma from 14 generations. Like that's a lot. That's the 1500s we're talking about. Like I did the math. I was like, where does 14 generations averagely take us to? That's like the 1600s. Like there was so much shit going on then, the witch hunts and everything. Like we're carrying all that shit. So, you know, pat yourself on the back because you're doing an amazing job.
Being the change, right?
Yeah.
And it's so powerful what you just said, because that's exactly it. It's the actions that we put into place that actually change the way that we get to experience life, but the way that the next generation, every generation after us gets to experience life.
Yeah.
So September this year will be 10 years since I chose to step away from having my biological mother in my life. And that's quite a drastic move, which I'm well aware of, and it is not a decision that I made easily. However, my circumstances were quite extreme, and that decision was made based on the emotional and physical safety and well-being of myself and my children. I had two babies at that stage. I had one actually, sorry, and the second I was pregnant with. And it has been a decade of some really gnarly healing and some uncovering of a lot of suppressed childhood memories that I'd been exposed to a lot of violence and emotional manipulation. And it's really interesting because this is like a deeper part to this. I've shared quite a bit about my story, but I did actually have contact with my biological mother about 2 months ago. She managed to get my phone number for the first time in 9 years. So when I made that cut, it was changed my phone number, blocked off all social media, let my family know, the kid's dad I was with and my direct family and his family, what was happening. And they all were very supportive in that. And so just 2 months ago, she managed to get my phone number. And one of the things that she said in that phone call was, how's your podcast? And so she very well could be listening to this, which is like very, feels really vulnerable.
Yeah, I know.
And the way that it was said, felt very much like, I'm watching what's happening in your life, even though I very clearly have said the boundaries are, I don't feel comfortable with you in my life. So I did make contact for the first time last year and shared around that, and I was at the point where I'd moved through anger and resentment, and I really truly wanted to have a conversation with her, saying, I hope that you find peace. I hope you find peace, and I hope you find love, and to let her know that I wasn't angry at her. And I wanted her to find whatever she was looking for in life. That really was the intention of the conversation. And it was a really good conversation, actually. Like, we're on the phone for about 20 minutes. And it was very um uh calm. And she said some things, and even in some of the things that she shared, I took a lot from it. She spoke into the grief that she had around not having her grandchildren in her life. And when we speak about unintentionally contributing to other people's wounding, like me choosing to witness the part that I have played in what would be very challenging things for her in the last 10 years. I know it must be very hard for her to know that obviously I'm out here and she has 3 grandchildren that she is not able to have any contact with. And whether or not she's really understood why, I don't know, and I don't need to know.
Yeah.
But, even taking responsibility for that, and allowing myself to feel that, I had really only thought about my own grief. It's such a strange thing to go through when you grieve for someone that's still alive. So 10 years ago, I started the grieving process for who I wanted my mother to be. And who I wanted her to be was such an unfair way to keep living, because it meant I didn't see her for who she truly was. I only saw her through the lens of who the little girl wanted her to be. And to really start that process. And then I've seen her a few times since then, because of a number of things that have occurred in the last 10 years. And I remember the first time I saw her after making that cut, and she looked different. She actually physically looked different to me, because I saw her clearly for who she is. And instead of me only seeing her through the lens of who I wanted and needed her to be. And it was one of the most, I still clear as day, like, remember the experience of actually seeing her and being like, holy fuck, like, that's not my mom. But actually it's, well, that is who she is as a woman. And like you were just saying, the generational stuff, I, like, my fucking heart feels for her, the life that she's had, and her sense of loss and grief, and being extremely mistreated by her biological mother, and then being adopted, and the confusion she must have had around her sense of identity, and then having a baby at 20, and not knowing how to mother. That's how I've explained it to my children, because my daughter does remember her being in our lives. I've said, she just didn't know how to be my mum. And some people don't, and that's okay. And the best thing for us is for her just not to be in our lives. And it's and then when I was 9 months old, she actually left. And then for all throughout my childhood, kind of came and went, and it was very unstable, and it was very uncertain. And the times that I did spend with her, when she had unsupervised access, that's when I was exposed to some quite a lot of family violence and domestic violence. And then later on in life, a lot of emotional, mental manipulation as a teenager that was very, very challenging, and had PTSD and stuff coming out of living in that family home. And I guess the part that feels the most true to me now is, and I've never I've never been at this point. The part that feels most true to me now is that for the first time in the last 10 years, I feel as if, not that I would choose for her to be in my children's lives, because from what I understand, there's still some potentially some addiction and some very unstable behavior. However, you know, if she came to me and wanted to have a conversation, I would be open to that. What I truly, truly would love, is if I could give her the opportunity to have access to all of the healing modalities and the healing tools that I've had available to me over the last 10 years. Not directly from me. That definitely would not work. But I have access to so many incredible practitioners and people in this space. And, you know, if there comes an opportunity and she would be open to it, I would love for her to be able to receive safe spaces. And like not that long ago, that even comprehending like her coming to me wanting a conversation and me connecting with people I know, I would have been like, fuck no, like no fucking way. Because that would feel too close in my space. And then the fear would come in of the fear of like, you know, so this is one of the things that like, it's such a fucked up thing. But one of the PTSD symptoms I had, and even about a month ago, came up again, was that I have had years and years of nightmares, really, really horrific nightmares of my mother trying to kill me.
Yeah.
Because I saw her, like, and my siblings, like, literally trying to kill each other. Like, you know, she was hospitalized because my sister stabbed her with a knife. There's been massive violence between them. And, like, it's such a fucked up thing. But, like, waking up and just being like, okay, like, that is what I'm processing, because I do have this fear that she'll be unstable and she'll find me and she'll hurt me and my children.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of just sat with it and been like, okay, if that is a possibility, so what? Like, look at it. I think for years it was just so dark, I didn't want to look at it. And so what I've done differently in the last couple of months is I've looked at it and I've been like, okay, if that did happen and she came to my house, I would know how to protect myself and I would know how to protect my children. And if she came to me and she came to my house, or we were out and there was some kind of physical, emotional abuse, I would not make that mean something about who I am anymore.
Yeah.
Because for so many years, her treating me like that, I made it mean that I was a worthless piece of shit. You know, I made it mean that I was unlovable. I made it mean all of these things. And I'm like, okay, if we did have an altercation or something happened, I would not make it mean something about me now. And then also the next part of it that's changed me recently is that my children not only chose me as their mother, but they chose her as their grandmother. And for all of the things that have already come from that, me being the mother that I am today is due to not wanting to be a lot of the things that she was. But also, you know, if she came into our lives in some way through circumstances, I'm like, okay, I have to trust that their souls are also choosing this. You know, their souls signed up for this. They're participating in this just as much as I am. And like, fuck, that's the layers, right? Like, that's when you take it away from me and my experience and my trauma and my this and my that. It's like, okay, so we're all in this collective place, particularly within intergenerations. What's here for us? So yeah, that's a part of my journey through the mother that I have never really shared, I have never really spoken into, and that feels really intimidating to even speak about, considering that a month ago she very clearly said that she knows about the podcast, and I don't know how. So for anyone that is relating and is like, oh my gosh, yeah, like this literally is like a woman who like stalking. I don't know, like there's a big kind of word, but even though I've cut her off all of social media and everything like that, still has has come in and known things about me and shared things about me with other people, and tried to get into to people that know me, which is a really fucking weird feeling
Yeah.
again. Yeah. So from that, what I just want to finish up with and sharing around my own experiences is when we can do the work to eliminate other people's, especially when the emotional charge is so close, like our mother and our father, when we can eliminate their behaviors and actions needing to mean something about who we are and our worthiness and who we are in the world, that's when everything changes drastically. I mean, that's when we free ourselves and essentially free everyone involved. It's taking away that charge that is sitting there that is around our caregivers and finding our own autonomy in it, and building up so much of ourselves that we're unchangeable regardless of their behaviors and actions and beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah, I just love it when you share parts of your journey, because that vulnerability just shines through so much, and it's so fucking powerful. How you said you just see it so differently now. Like when you start to see people differently and through the eyes of love, through the eyes of God, as we say, it's a game changer. And I think you said something really important with like you had this idea of what you wanted it to look like. And I think that is like that's our hidden agenda, isn't it? In a way, like we want to see people, the good in people, and we sometimes don't see people how who they truly are. And there was like something around our mothers and fathers, and this can be different for everybody. They're the first caregivers that we look to for our safety. Our nervous system, when we're first born, is just looking for safety. It's looking to stay alive. It's looking to just be nurtured. And it's when we don't have that, it's detrimental to our growth. And to see you on here now, who you are, considering what you've been through, like it makes me emotional, because it's like you're living proof that other women can do this. Like other women can get through it, no matter what it looks like. Even though my story's like very different to Showie's, it's still like that, like even just as small as like my mum having a father wound affecting my mother wound, it makes the biggest difference to your relationships and to everything around you, no matter how big or small. Everything has a purpose. All of it has a purpose. And I think like I said, the self-discovery and moving through these wounds, like it like what would happen if you had a physical wound that was deep? You would be in so much pain naturally. Just because it's an emotional wound doesn't make it any different. It's like take that time and reach out to people who can relate. Like if you relate to Showie, reach out to Showie. If you relate to me, reach out to me. Like we're the type of women who hold that space. We don't, like I said, we don't judge, we don't shame. We sit and we listen with an open, beautiful heart. And just it's more like I think all of us have a mother wound to some degree, no matter what that looks like to each person. It's like saying someone hasn't got any trauma. Like you said, there's a scale of it. There's just so much to unpack, and we can't talk about everything in this podcast episode about the mother wound. But I can probably hear some of you saying, well, how do I heal my mother wound? And what can I do? Where do I start? That's one question I get a lot, is where do I start? Like, how do I start this journey of healing my mother wound, no matter what it looks like? So for me, it became this delicate thing that what I wanted to take really, I wanted to tread carefully with it. I didn't want to rush it. And what I found was the more I trusted my journey and the more I just trusted the process of my self-discovery and my inner work and my healing, which is mine and Pip's, this is my journey, is I didn't rush it and it came naturally to me. So like figuring out, it's that light bulb the connection, like realizing that's why mum's that way and talking to her about it, and then diving into my nan's childhood and being like, wow, like doing my trauma timeline was so eye-opening as well. And I'm so lucky to have that trauma timeline. We were doing some generational stuff with a client last week, and she is going back to the UK. She hasn't seen her family in years, and she said, she hasn't got grandparents really to kind of like talk about the generational stuff then. So she's kind of a guessing game, really. So she's going to get curious when she goes over and speak to her parents about, you know, this timeline of trauma and the generational stuff. And, you know, I'm lucky that I understand from both sides, you know, my dad's side and my mum's side. But I just think if it's to a level of, I know Shari will probably touch into it on a more of a deeper level with her experience, but for me, I had to look at like, where can I nurture myself in this moment? You know, like even my mum was amazing. She fed me, she bathed me, she hugged me, you know, everything like that. But where was the things missing for me that I needed to heal? So, you know, I used to write myself love letters. Like it sounds really cheesy, but I did. I used to sing myself lullabies. Like it honestly, it sounds so corny and cheesy, but I did. And then I started to really dive into who I am and not being ashamed of loving Disney, because Disney was my childhood thing and it just kept me connected to childhood. And that's why I think this inner child within all of us needs that, you know, needs that nurturing from ourselves. So depending on where you are with mother wounding is just look at reparenting yourself in ways that you weren't parented.
Yeah, I love that. And what a beautiful experience for us to go into, right? Is becoming the parent that we would have loved to have, and doing that from a place that is really action based and is really empowering, and not with the resent, but just with the I get to do this now. Um, yeah, so I have done lots of things. Yeah. So I think for me, when I truly started uncovering a lot of the pieces, was when I started seeing a therapist when I was diagnosed postnatal depression. So when I was pregnant with my second baby, that is when I chose, for a number of reasons, to step away from my biological mother being in my life. And I made that cut. So I was pregnant.
Yeah.
And then after I had my second baby, there were lots of warning signs, like lots of things are happening. We were like, fuck. And so I started seeing a counselor for postnatal depression, which we then realized was so much more. Like, actually, I was referred to this one counselor through like maternal mental health in Wellington. And I had one session with her, and she was quite new into counseling, and she like straight away, I could see on her face, she's like, oh, fuck this. She just was not prepared. She thought she was getting like a classic postnatal depression. And I was like, oh no, there's so much more.
Yeah.
So then I was referred to this incredible therapist down in Wellington. And I know you guys have heard me talk about how somatic therapy, absolutely. And gosh, there is a time and a place for talk therapy. And we did CBT therapy. And honestly, finding this woman changed the whole trajectory of my life. I was seeing her every fortnight for a long time. And then I got pregnant again. And so then I kept seeing her because I really wanted to make sure that I had that support going into my next, having my next baby. And it was during those sessions that we realized, so postnatal depression, prenatal depression, post-traumatic stress disorder from coming out of living in a home with family violence with my mother and siblings. And we looked at all the ways that was displayed. But then we looked further back. We're like, fuck, I think I've been depressed for 10 years.
Yeah.
We're like, holy shit, you know. And I spoke about self-harm, suicidal ideation from when I was a teenager and never really understanding why. So that was what helped me go like, oh shit, the things that I didn't realize was so big, a lot of which had come from my relationship with my mother, had drastically impacted my life. So then the last couple of years diving into somatic therapy and holistic wellness practices, holy fuck, like honestly, if I hadn't gone down the path of holistic wellness and somatic therapy, there is absolutely no chance I would be the woman I am today.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely not. Without getting a support team around me, as well as my own practices for supporting myself. But I have had like multiple like holistic wellness practitioners. I've had like Reiki, I've had different kinds of somatic therapy sessions. I've done like breath work, I've done sound healing, I've gone to retreats, like I've done all the workshops, like there's so many things. And this is why working in this space, I'm so passionate about it, because I hands down know what fucking works. I am the living evidence of how this stuff works. Like statistically, I should be a drug addict. I should be an abusive mother to my children. I should have mental health conditions and illnesses based on what I've experienced, and also through what would have come through my generational lines. Like I should not be, according to all those things, the woman that is sitting and speaking to you today. And so to give you a little bit of inspiration and some faith and showing up for yourself and finding the ways, and obviously we're in this podcast episode condensing it, but please like reach out to us if you're like, okay, this is where I'm at. Interestingly enough, I have a lot of my clients that have had challenging relationships with their mothers, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Hey. Yeah, like a lot of the clients I work with have. So yeah, reach out if you need to. And yeah, like Pippa was saying though, like go easy. I know one thing that happened quite early on as I started uncovering a lot of things was that I'd be like, sweet, I'm feeling really good about it. And then like a year later, I would swing back around, like Mother's Day would come, or my birthday would come, or her birthday would come, or it'd be one of my kids' celebrations, you know, or it was like when I got married, I'd look back at my wedding photos, like all these things, and I would be like triggered, and I'd be back in this fucking hole again, you know, of feeling all this stuff. And that's normal. Like it is a normal process when you're going through these big things to kind of swing back around. However, that's when we lean into the practices. That's when we lean into the tools. And I can tell you 100%, if you keep leaning into the support and the practices, even when the things come up, they lessen over time and they don't leave such a big charge. You know, I just had some emotions coming up speaking about this.
Yeah.
Like 5 years ago, I wouldn't have even been able to speak about it, and I would have been a fucking mess, and then I would have been sitting in it for like 7 days, you know. So just trusting the process of healing, like trusting the process of doing this work, and getting like I will say I don't think talk therapy alone. No, actually I take that back. I know talk therapy alone, when it comes into this conversation, will not be the best support for you.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
We will definitely touch on it with father wound, because father wound's very different in a especially, so we haven't really touched on it because of timing, but mother wound can impact men in a certain way with their relationships to other women.
Absolutely.
And then we haven't really touched on that. And then it can affect women with the trust and the relationships with friends. And even if, you know, you're bisexual, lesbian, like that can play a big effect as well. So we'll touch on that with father wound, and we'll probably mix the two of them together. But
yeah,
a father wound, how it's played out for you, me, like anyone, like I've had many clients come and they've had really shitty fathers growing up, and they've just distrust men. Like that's one of their core wounds, is I don't trust men. So there's just this element of the you know, the gender. So I was thinking of talking about that, like how, you know, we can have like the wounding when it bleeds into our friendships and our relationships as well. And we'll touch on that, especially because we're talking predominantly women, how, you know, father wound affects women, you know, with the male aspect to it. So yeah, like Shawi said, just that, build that support team around you, build a fortress to help you. Like that's how I saw it, was my fortress, like my Disney castle. I've got my Disney castle, and I can go in and find Mickey's over there and Minnie's over there, and I can go and have all these different therapies. And you know, like I said, when it gets heavy, you know, when I'm doing trauma healing or whatever with my clients, I say, if it gets too heavy, you say, like, that's like I've said before, we only go as fast as your nervous system can handle. I'm not going to push your nervous system way past, because it's re-traumatizing. I don't want to go down that road. Feel into your own nervous system when you're doing this. We'll talk about this on the next one, about some, you know, nervous system regulation tools, but feel into that. And if it's too much, I said to clients, step away. If you're doing a workbook of mine and it gets too much, step away, because you don't want to dive too much into it. And you're like, whoa, this is too much. And you end up running a mile, you know, but you want the healing. So go easy. And if anything comes up, and anything's come up in this episode, I know we've kind of condensed it into 45 minutes. Shawi and I could do like 5-hour episodes each week if we had the time. We would just talk about all these topics. But as always, please reach out to us on the Instagram page, and we're here to support you, you know, even if it's just a message, a voice note, a
Yeah.
podcast episode, and another one. So
Thanks, loves.
yeah, we'll be back again
Thank
with
you
part 2 for Father Wound.
yeah, that'll be the next one. And thank you, Pippa, for just
Yeah.
holding me through some of those emotions that came up and
Hugging
just
you.
yeah, and being just a constant support and trusting me as I continue to go down, particularly this wounding, and giving me that support. I think it's a really good reminder that even when you are like a fucking wellness coach and in this space, like we've
Yeah.
all had experiences and we
Yes.
all also benefit from support from other
Yes.
people. We're all also human.
Mhm.
You know, let's get down from the pedestal and be like, we've all had
Yep.
experiences and let's just keep supporting one another through them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. We're always
Ah,
learning and growing, always. So
mm,
take it easy and just reach out if you need any
yeah.
help. And we'll be back next week with another episode. Love
Yeah.
you lots.
Love you.
Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Mwah, mwah.